Okay, so there's a new interesting issue on the horizon, which came at me from various sides, so it must be something we need to talk about. But so let's go back to Helen. She's always this test for a lot of things. We've said already that she's a model of risky, receptive, passionate behavior that makes her life presumably exciting and meaningful. And because she's open to the moods, and the moods show us what matters, and since she's open to lots of moods, lots of people, two lovers at least that we know of, matter a lot. And but she's got this problem that moods are risky, that acting on them without sort of justifying or reflecting on what you're doing, but just responding to being pulled into some action or other, can get you into trouble. And this is the important thing, because it gets the interpreters all mixed up, and then the translators all mixed up. I mean, moods can change so that what seemed to you a wonderful thing to do can look like now a disastrous, reckless, shameful, regrettable thing to do. And this happens to Helen, where she had this strong pro-Paris mood that she was ready to sacrifice everything, her husband, her child, her country, for Paris. And then she discovered that he was a worthless character, and then she felt bad about herself, but she never morally condemns herself. Somebody could write an interesting paper who knew enough Greek and I'm amazed it hasn't been written, maybe it has, how over the centuries all the translators have managed to take these ambiguous words, like having remorse or regretting, where remorse means you were sorry you ever did it and you would never do it again, and regretting means you regret the results, but if you were in that kind of situation, you would do it in that situation again, in that mood again, you would do that again. And in all of them, I'm not going to go over them. We did a lot last time. So every one of those places, you just bring it to office hours, where I've got the one person who is reading Homeric Greek, and we can just look at them one by one. I would like to make a list of all the terms that the translators use which are ambiguous as to whether they're regretful, that as bad things happened and it's too bad, or whether they're moral, that the person who did them is a bad person. And the translators spin them all so that it looks like Helen is constantly saying about herself that she's a bad person, when what she is saying is, take the example of fault. They say it was Helen's fault. Well, that's ambiguous. It could be you're blaming her for this bad characteristic that she's got, but it could be that it's her fault, just the way it's somebody else's fault that they tripped over the electricity and broke the computer. But anyway, we're not going to stick with that. We want to, because what came out of that was, but Helen is still praised. Remember, she's still peerless among women. Whatever it is that she's done, it can't be these morally wrong, bad things that the translators put in there. The most it can be is things turned out badly. She regrets it. But she's still praised. And now comes this good question from B's discussion section. And I hope all of you in your discussion sections bring up good, hard questions, and because then we can learn something from them. I've learned from this one. Here's the question. How can Helen be praised for what she did, and yet she can't be blamed for what she did? How come she giving in to the calling of the gods is a good thing, but somehow the results of it are so bad that you ought to condemn her? Well, it's how can we hold her responsible for the good things she did, and then say that she's not responsible for the bad things that resulted because she was responding to the call of the gods, and that was a good thing? I think that's the answer's got to be, and it's something like, and I'm still thinking about it, so I have to say it over and over, trying to get it right. If you are asking who is she morally responsible, and how come we praise her for her morally responsible good acts, and then why don't we blame her for her morally responsible bad acts? The answer to that is the question of who's morally responsible and how much responsible just isn't important to Homer. It's not as if they don't have a notion of who's responsible and whether they can be called bad or good on the basis of what they did. It's that this whole idea of praising and blaming isn't important to them. We're going to find out what is important in a minute. But first, what's not important, what's simply marginal, is people taking responsibility for what they did and then doing and then having to say they're sorry if they did a bad thing, or saying or defend and so forth. So what I'm trying to say is, I haven't been clear. I've said that sort of the notion of acting freely and taking responsibility for what you did is something not important to Homer, but it's not something that the Greeks didn't understand. It's just that it was, and this is this crucial thing, marginal. And we've got this wonderful example. On page 414, Telemachus takes full responsibility for something he did, just as if he was a modern person. But nobody pays any attention. It only happens once in the Odyssey, as far as I know, and that anybody takes this kind of responsibility, and it has no follow-up. Here's what happens. On 414, the suitors turn out to have new weapons, but the weapons were supposed to all have been locked up. What happened? Telemachus, one of the and Odysseus says, Telemachus, one of the serving women, is tipping the scales against us in this fight. And Telemachus could have just let that go, but he doesn't let it go. He takes responsibility for having not closed the door to the storeroom where the shields and swords are, so that the suitors now have a bunch of weapons, and it was not in Odysseus' plan to fight a bunch of armed suitors. It was part of the plan that he was fighting a bunch of disarmed suitors with his own, so he could hack them up at his leisure. So anyway, and what does Telemachus say? It's my own fault, father, mine alone. The storeroom door, I left it wide open. They were more alert than I. And what's the result? Does anybody blame anybody? Or not really. Then they say, Eumaeus, go and lock that door. And bring back the woman who was doing this. That's a funny thing, isn't it? Well, I guess there are two things happening at once. There's a woman sort of giving aid to these people, and it looked like she was also the one who left the storeroom door open, but it turns out that was Telemachus. But the whole thing just goes by so fast, it doesn't matter. Now, wait a second, because I want to draw the conclusion. There's something new going on that's important, namely that you've got to have the notion of what is marginal in the culture, that they understand, that they do, but it's not important. And then you've got to understand what the mainline thing is, and what they understand, and what they do, and why that's very important. And what we're seeing is that there is in the culture, and because all human beings have some things in common, and maybe they don't all, maybe there's some culture in which, I cancel that. As an existentialist, I have no opinion where there might not be a culture in which nobody ever takes responsibility for anything. But in Homer, they know perfectly well what taking a responsibility is, and feeling that they've done something wrong, and saying it's their fault, but nobody bothers to blame him any more than they bother to praise people. That's just not the business that they're in. Now, question over there. Yeah.
Ignore him because they were trying to spend their own lives. They couldn't spend any time.
Well, he just could have said, you incompetent idiot, I should have found somebody better to fight with, and then gone back to fighting. I mean, it makes no big deal it's funny. I mean, it makes no impression at all. He's not angry at Telemachus. He's not saying, don't worry, kid, it can happen to anybody. He just ignores it. but it's not a big deal, because all I want to do is use this line not to sort of analyze their psychology, but just to say, look, they can have a marginal sense of their free will in which they do things for which they're responsible, and which we can say it's their fault and morally blame them, and which we can also praise them and say, well, that was a great thing to do. Yeah.
Go into their psychology, but that telemachus did this as a sort of self-motivated action, isn't that?
Yes. Oh, it is. It is. When I said I don't want to go into the psychology, I didn't mean there wasn't any. Good point. Oh, yeah, that is psychology. But it's just using the words, big words I was using earlier. It's the ontology, the kind of world that this person opens up and lives in that matters, not this particular free actions for which they can then be praised or blamed. That's important. So in fact, you were the perfect transition, because I was going to say, as long as we're in the marginal business, there's another issue that's come up in section and office hours and so forth, in which people say, and rightly, that, but how do you mean these people have no inner feeling, no sense of, inner feelings? The translators call it the heart every once in a while. And that gets me to a line, I don't remember whether I quoted it, but it's even more amazing. Both of these are so marginal. It's wonderful to have an example in here of something that can be a real phenomenon, and people all know it and recognize it. They just don't care. So here's the other one. People want to say, but they must have some inner. Well, they sort of have an inner. Somebody has an inner, namely Odysseus. Did I read the passage that's relevant to this? I don't remember. If I'm going to go back to page 360. I think I mentioned it in my lecture, but I didn't have it marked, and I didn't go back and read it. Here it is. Here's Odysseus listening to the story of the awful things that happened during the Trojan War, and Penelope is crying because she's thinking about how Odysseus died in the war and so forth. And it says at the end of the top paragraph, the middle of the page, imagine how his heart ached for his lady, his wife, in tears. She's in tears because she's having a feeling, but she's not having an inner feeling, a feeling in which it doesn't have to be expressed in action and tears at all. But what happens with him? His eyes, but he never blinked. His eyes might have been made of horn or iron for all that she could see. He had this trick, wept as if he willed to inward. Look at that. He's got inward feelings, but they're treated not as some deep story about human beings and their psychology, but some clever trick that somebody like Odysseus has. And that's amazing. In other words, the inner's around. Odysseus knows it, and he's probably not the only one. But nobody pays any attention to it, except the Homer wants to sort of give you one more example of how special Odysseus is, that he can't keep something to himself. I remember I mentioned this when I talked about St. Jerome reading aloud from the Bible later, that Augustine talks about, but I didn't have the passage. Okay, now. So now that I've talked about this issue, namely, I'll try once more. It's very important to have this notion of what's marginal and what's central. Because if you don't, you end up saying outrageous things in one direction or the other. You either make the smug kind of humanist story, in which you think that everything that's central for us is central for them. In fact, that's all there is. And you talk about the inner feelings they've got and so forth. Or you completely deny that they're any way like us, which is more like what I was doing. And then you end up saying seemingly implausible things about people, like they've got no inner or they've got no sense of responsibility. That seems wrong. If you've got those only two, you can't say anything sensible about the Odyssey. You've got to have a third concept, something which they do experience, do understand, and don't care, because it's not, from their point of view, not important. Yeah.
Just a bit. I was wondering if it's not explained to them, then why did Homer put it in? But this is the main character. Why do you make it so special?
Well, I mean, I guess just to say, I mean, I don't understand your question really. Why shouldn't Homer put it in? He's interested in telling you how special Odysseus is, and he's telling you, look at that, Odysseus has an inner. I don't see a problem. But I want to. Okay, you two, and I've been told that I spend too much time listening to people talk, although I think it's wonderful. I've never had such a talkative class in my life. On the other hand, I don't get covered what I want to cover, and I don't follow an outline that anybody else can follow. Maybe I should just take a poll. How many think we've had too much discussion in the course up to now? Aha, you see, that was coming through to me. And how many think it was fine? It's not even 50-50. Okay, so you guys get to talk, but you can see that the world is against you. Okay, go ahead.
I think what that man was asking was, why is Odysseus special for being able to feel that inner feeling if it's not?
Oh, well, just because it's a neat trick. I mean, that's what he says. I mean, that's why it's such a neat, nice quote. He had this trick, not he had this power or the secret important thing. For Homer, it's just, look at that, another thing, like he can disguise himself. He has all sorts of tricks. And that the inner should be lumped under tricks. That's the marginalizing of it. One more. Yeah. Okay, good. Onward. Then, so now what comes out of B's question is more discussion that I had with Sean Kelly, the sort of echo of the course in the East, who's running parallel with us. And we began to worry about the various ways you could relate to people's actions besides praise and blame. So now let's just summarize. We've already got the modern view, which is marginal in Homer, that one controls what one does, and either one does what one ought to do and then get praised, or one does what they shouldn't do and they get blamed. And that's very important for us. And the conclusion, yeah, it's important for us, but it's not an issue for the Greeks. They don't care. Well, how do they relate to people's actions? One more. I say, we haven't been talking about praising, simple praising. I mean, Helen gets praised as peerless and so forth, but it's so complicated by the fact that she regrets what she did. So a simple praise is Eumaeus the swineherd. He's just good. He does what any good swineherd would do. And there's a sense in which Penelope gets praise, that she's just a good, faithful wife. There's nothing wrong with doing what any good person would do. And that's fine. But there must be something else going on if that's not what's important. So what is going on? Well, I want to say there are three things. People can be praised and blamed. We've just done that. People can also be admired or not admired. I don't know, what's the opposite of admired? Despised? That's pretty good. Despised, admired, or despised. And then there's a third one, and that's an interesting one. People can be worshipped. And now, so what are those other two? Well, admired. That's where people do things that brings them and the situation out at its best, and they're receptive to the gods, and what one does is worthy, and what one doesn't do is not worthy. It's not a question of praise and blame anymore. It's some more, well, I don't know what to call it, except it's a kind of admired and not admired. It's got to do with things that are not under your control. Remember the first one, praise and blame. You're responsible for what you do. You could have not done it. You could have done it some other way. But there's a kind of action which is drawn out of you. And that, Helen is already in the admired, not admired group. But I didn't realize until today, preparing the lecture, that Helen is in two groups. She's in the admired group and in the worship group. So we have to wait and see how that can happen. But so the group that's admired does worthy and also despised for doing worthy things or unworthy things, despicable things. And what's important is that when they do the worthy things, they bring things out at their best, and they can't do it by being responsible and willful. They have to let it be drawn out of them. And we've talked about that in talking, I think I did, talking about masters in sports. Oh yeah, it was the Knobloch phenomenon again. I mean, he did this super good, he won the award of the year for what second basemen do, and or what, I don't know, infielders do or something. And he did it without thinking about it, and without planning it, without taking, I mean, it wasn't in the responsibility business. He was responding to the call of the situation. Presumably some god in Homer thinking drew him to do it, just like Aphrodite draws Helen to run off with Paris. Now, I wrote something. I went back and looked at the book that Sean and I have just written. I got the galleys today. I could have brought the book and waved it around. It almost exists. But here I'm going to read from it. So when human beings are this is now in the second category, so to speak. Not the praise and blame, but the admire and not admire. When human beings are acting at their best in great feats of athleticism or poetry or music or heroism in the battlefield, like Achilles in the Iliad, people say of themselves, that they're not responsible for what they did. They found themselves doing something incredible, something amazing, acting at their best, more than they could think they could do. And the action somehow came through them, but not by any willful decision. It's as if it was drawn out of them, as if they were called to act in the way they did. And now, this phenomenon seems marginal in our world. We don't focus. You never heard of this Knobloch situation. We don't focus on the way musicians get into the flow. The musicians do, presumably, but it's not our phenomenon. Why? Because it's been wiped out, unfortunately, by this Kantian autonomy responsibility issue, which is the blame and praised one. And so now it's marginal in our world. It's incompatible with our sense of responsibility, where this action just gets pulled out of these people. It seems like it's some kind of an anomaly, some kind of mistake to think about action that way. At best, it's taken to show that we can't be clear and responsible about everything we do, that we should certainly try. But Homer would think that was completely wrong. This looking down on receptivity because you're not responsible, because you don't freely do it, is a big mistake. Just because you can't freely do it doesn't mean it's not one of the best thing you can do. On Homer's account, being responsible for our actions is not what brings out human beings at their best. Rather, human beings at their best, when they hold themselves open to being called, are when they hold themselves to be open to being called by the gods, and that's what's important. And Homer's very sensitive to that. And that's why the gods are always around helping people and hindering people and getting involved in what's going on, because it's always in the area of the flow. It's doing whatever you're doing out of your head, so to speak. There are all these phrases we've got in our culture in some areas, like flow for the I don't know who people. What's the music one? Is that flow? Not one. In jazz, what do you say? In flow? I see. Oh, there's a new one. Anyway, new to me. Anyway, so we've got terms for that, but very marginal terms. Marginal, like punk rock drummers, which B is. They talk that way. But in general, in our culture, we don't talk that way, and we don't think it's important. Okay, so now we know, though, that admired means people acting at their best and doing what's worthy, which is another thing like admirable. And Helen is doing that when she runs off with Paris. She's responding to the call of the gods without reflection and without freely choosing to do it. And she doesn't, and the question of whether she's responsible for it or not is just irrelevant. It's drawn out of her, and she does it. Okay, so now, what's this new one? Well, that's what I'm calling worshipped. People, I don't know what's the opposite of being worshipped. I have no idea. Maybe when I cursed. I guess that's right. So let's see how that works. I don't know I don't know whether cursed works in here, but we can see. So what is it to do something even more than something praiseworthy? That's number one. More than admirable. That's number two. Doing something else. Well, my favorite example is Marilyn Monroe. We have to start with something besides the Greek. We'll get to the Greek. Well, that is Helen. But what is it? Why is Marilyn Monroe called a goddess and called a star? Because she shines, presumably. What is going on there? Well, she's not a moral model. It's not that she shines because women can take sort of rules from about how to act from her. It's that women could in the 40s, I guess it was, in the 50s. How many have seen Marilyn Monroe in a movie? I trust that it's not too far. Boy, being a goddess doesn't last all that long. Anyway, so in the days when Marilyn Monroe was a shining exemplar of what it is to be a woman, women saw themselves in the light of her. They imitated her style, but you can't really do that by consciousness. You can't analyze a style as a bunch of rules. They automatically, without knowing it, took up her style. So that men saw, well, women understood themselves as attractive and beautiful and so forth in the light of the perfect case of Marilyn Monroe, and men wanted women who were like that, and she sort of invented another way of being a woman, which is a subcategory of another way of being a human being, and therefore people really regarded her with awe and wonder, and as if she was a kind of marvel. And now look at Helen. I mean, Helen's an even superer case than Marilyn Monroe because she's still being sung about, whereas apparently Marilyn Monroe is rapidly being forgotten. So Helen, anyway, was a wonder, and she and the Greeks expressed that by saying she was a goddess, half a goddess. She was the daughter of Zeus, and who came to Leda as a swan, and after they mated, then the swan produced two kids. One of them is Helen, and you should just know the other one is Clytemnestra, who you're going to read about next week. Now, then I want to read you how Sean and I wrote about this. I haven't found yet where we wrote about it. What's that? Oh, really? Pollux, then. Those are twins, and they're up in the sky, at least in constellations. I don't know, but don't worry about it. I'll get in trouble if I even listen to you. Okay, here we go. So let's go to reading again from the book. Our word beautiful, therefore, does not properly convey the kind of sacred feeling that the Greeks felt before the finest things. In fact, it's trivializing merely to say that Helen was the most beautiful woman in the world. Indeed, her standard epithet, diagonaktikon or something, as a dyslexic, I can't read the Greek. Anyway, her standard epithet means a goddess among women. That's what people thought about Marilyn Monroe, but even more about Helen. But really, we have to say something more than that. Helen is the embodiment of Eros. She's not just a servant of Eros, namely responding to being called whenever Eros calls. She's the perfect picture of attractive beauty. You've got to realize the Greek Eros doesn't mean just erotic. It means the way beautiful people are attracted to each other, and period. And she's the perfect example of that. And indeed, she is so above all others in the sacred domain that she's considered a daughter of Zeus himself. To say that the erotic dimension of existence is sacred in Homer's world is to say that it immediately inspires gratitude and wonder in all noble human beings. Eros is not just physical or sexual pleasure in Homer, rather it's the entire way of being drawn that draws the best people naturally to one another, a way of being, and that way of being is overseen is and promoted by golden Aphrodite. And Helen is the epitome of that sacred dimension of life. And in this domain, all other women in Homer's world are measured against Helen, just as they could be measured against Marilyn Monroe once upon in the 40s. I'm going to read a little bit more. Helen is the site of erotic activity. Noble people are drawn to her. Beautiful things gather around her naturally. And everything about her, from her way of talking to her way of carrying herself to her way of interacting with others, manifests this paradigm, this perfect example of excellence in the erotic domain. That's why Helen is called shining among women. And when I can't read all of this, but it's so beautiful. When Helen comes on the scene at one point, and Homer says, Helen came out of her scented chamber, a moving grace like Artemis, straight as a shaft of gold. And then he describes all of the servants who wait upon her, and all the stuff that's around her. And then it says Helen gazed at her husband and spoke. That's book 4, line 120. But now I want to just read a little bit more here. So Homer understands. Now I want to say, and this stuff that's going on, that the proper way is to feel wonder and worshipfulness toward Helen and Marilyn Monroe people. That's what's important in the culture. Homer understands that that's what's really deep and important. So we've just seen that Helen is the epitome of that, and the right way to relate to that is with awe and wonder and so forth. Okay, and bottom line, I just didn't read. And morality is just irrelevant when you're in the dimension of paradigms which define what beauty is and what it is to be a woman or a man or Harper like Homer and so forth. When you're in the dimension of these people who are defining what it is to be whatever, or redefining it, because there's already some view of what it is to be a woman, presumably, Harper. But and you can remember, you can do that very, very well, be a woman or a Harper. Then you're in the admiration department. But you can do it more than well. You can redefine it. You can redefine the game. Somebody says to me, I don't understand any basketball, but Michael Jordan is in this godlike, worshipful dimension that he changed basketball. If that means anything to anybody, good. Okay, so that's it. So now that we can have a moment of talking, I think that's what we need, because I don't want to not hear what you have to say. I just want you to know what I have to say. Yeah.
Wait for work of art, how it's kind of summing up what it means in this culture to be a woman, we're giving a shining example.
Yes.
And then
that's right. And you don't even choose her as a model. The women can't help, the mirror neurons can't help picking up her style, and the women start acting like that. And you're calling it a work of art because you know Heidegger, I presume.
Just because in my discussion second, we kind of talk about how a work of art.
Exactly. Yeah, a work of art in this Heidegger sense. I wasn't going to talk about it, but I think I will for a minute. Yeah, I had in the back of my mind, yes, Helen is a work of art in Heidegger's sense. What does a work of art do? It holds up and focuses. Well, it does two different things. I want to get into this. Heidegger talks about the Greek temple, and the Greek temple holds up and focuses for the people what their understanding of the sacred and holy is. It may be better for us to take the medieval cathedral. The medieval cathedral isn't just any old building. It embodies the relation of heaven and earth and good and bad and sin and saints, and all that is written all over it. And it's all the battle between light and dark in the stone and in the glass is written all over it. It embodies the medieval Christian understanding of what it is to be anything, what it is to be a person, what it is to be a plant, what it is to be a sinner, and what it is to be a saint. It's all there. And that's one function of a work of art. But I want to say that, and then Heidegger says that very quickly in this essay called The Origin of the Work of Art. That there's an even more important kind of work of art, and that's instead of one that articulates or focuses the culture, one that re-articulates or refocuses it. That is, and a reconfiguring work of art is what the medieval cathedral was to the Greek temple, so to speak, or what and that's all too dramatic. I can't put it that way. A reconfiguring work of art takes whatever it is that counts as or whatever and gives us a new understanding of that. And Helen is, the way I'm telling you, like a reconfiguring work of art. But anyway, that's right. There is, both of these are in there. And now we're so close to saying something which I wanted to say in the first lecture, and that is I'm just using the term from Heidegger, works of art, and I can't remember. Did I talk about the difference between great books and works of art? I did. Okay, well now we're connecting up with that, because we were reading these books as works of art, as books that focused, or even better, reconfigured the culture, and we're reading about how, in Heidegger jargon, what it is for a work of art to work. And I would go into it more, but you will see that Aeschylus goes into it beautifully, and the Bible goes into it. So we're going to hear a lot about reconfiguring works of art. But if you're careful in the jargon of this course, you tell people, or you tell yourself, we're reading great works and understanding how they're working. But we're not reading great books, because great books are just telling you what you already know, and so forth. If you read these books, they help you, stop with that. Okay, now I'm going to go back to this. Is that okay? So back to Helen. We finished Helen. One of the stories I haven't talked about is the very interesting way that Homer's kind of polytheism doesn't rank anything. It isn't telling you is it better to be like Helen, or like Odysseus, or like Eumaeus, and so forth. The amazing thing about Homer's kind of polytheism is he likes all of these different ways of being, all these styles of life that are available in this multi-god culture. And I'm going to talk about that because it's so amazing how extreme his open-mindedness is. And once you get rid of, I think, the idea that there's one God, and you have to rank everything in respect to that, which you'll see when we get to Dante in medieval, you can be open to this all range. The rainbow of colors is Melville's name for this. Melville is our goal in the course. It's Melville brings back Homer, or brings back some, sort of obviously more nowish version of Homer. Okay, let me go now and talk about the way Homer understands Odysseus, because Odysseus is just the opposite of Helen, and Homer likes them both equally. And it helps just to summarize, to pull things together, to do this. So Helen is always ready to plunge into some new adventure, and if she's drawn into it. Another kind of mood is always being cool, never losing your head, never getting carried away, being able to get in tune with every situation. And you realize who that is. That's Odysseus. That's when we talked about James Bond briefly. If you get the right mixture of James Bond and Captain Kirk, you get just this nice picture. And so, except that Odysseus, I often think, is one stage more, because somehow James Bond doesn't seem to have any family to go back to, nor Kirk. Whereas the amazing thing about Odysseus, he's the most sort of perfect model of what it is to be a human being available in the culture. He can be an adventurer, and be a father, and be a lover of all kinds of weird creatures, and the lover of his wife, and he's got all of that. So we have to find out what that's like. So Odysseus, every time he enters a new world, he isn't suspicious of what's going on there, but he comes in sensitive trying to get in tune with what's there, and understanding that you can't just trust appearances. This is keep your eyes open when you see how Agamemnon comes home in the Oresteia. He comes home in just the wrong way, and that is not trying to psych out what's going on, but just to plunge in and say, "Hi, Clytemnestra, I'm home," and that goes badly. But so he's always looking at all the possibilities, and he succeeds in getting in sync with each world he's in, and he's alert to all the possibilities, even ones that no one else can see. So culture takes moods we've been talking about seriously, and here are two extremes that the culture takes seriously, and that is, one is sensitive to and swept away by one way of seeing the world or one type of situation at a time. And moreover, it can be plural worlds, but it's always the same world. I don't know how I'm putting this very well. What's happening with Helen? Well, she's swept away by different lovers, at least we know two, and there's probably more in the past and future. But there's always, it's in a certain way multi, but what's singular is it's always swept away by this kind of higher erotic attraction of the beautiful for the beautiful. So there's really one way of seeing the world. And the other is a sensitivity to all types of situations, all ways of seeing in the world. And so Odysseus is open to all the possibilities. And now I asked earlier to myself, I may have mentioned it, what gods do people see? Well, Odysseus never sees Aphrodite, as far as I know. I'm saying some of these things so you can contradict me because I may be just wrong. But I don't think Odysseus ever sees Aphrodite or any other god than Athena. And that, what? Oh, he sees Hermes. Good. When Hermes tells him that he comes to visit Calypso, get away from Circe or Calypso. Overcome.
How to deal with Circe.
Yeah, how to deal with Circe. And he sees him, and that's right. But it's Athena who comes then and tells Calypso she's got to let him go, I think. But you're right. Hermes is a very interesting character. I'll get to Hermes. But it's true. It's right that he should see Hermes. Because, well, let me say something now. No, didn't think a minute. No, let me finish this, and then I'll get to the gods like Hermes. So let's see now. So we know that I think that Odysseus never sees Aphrodite anyway, and always sees Athena. And Helen, I think, now check me with this, never sees any goddess except Aphrodite or God, and that's how it should be. So she lives in one mood that excludes all the others. And in a way, I think Odysseus can be open to all sorts of moods. I guess. I'm not sure how that works. But now the question is, does Homer favor Athena, or and Odysseus adapting to all sorts of situations, or does Homer admire Helen and Aphrodite being totally sensitive and totally devoted to one kind of mood, namely this erotic kind of mood? And the answer, I think, is Homer thinks they're both equally admirable. I was going to say worshipable, but I'm not sure there's any godlike one of them. But in any case, they are equal, and that's interesting. That means that so being moody or being cool are just two possibilities. What's so sort of interesting is that the Iliad and the Odyssey are really about them. The Iliad's about being extremely moody. It begins right off with Agamemnon getting all upset in a mood in which he, Achilles gets all upset and is about to kill Agamemnon, and Achilles is always all upset, and he's the moody one. And then the other one begins with right off telling you that Odysseus is is a character that can try all sorts of things. He's totally devious and totally maneuverable. There's a funny Greek word that nobody knows how quite to translate it, but it means that he's sort of adaptable to all situations. And Homer just doesn't have to choose. But it's more extreme than that. And now I'm going to skip something because I want to make sure I finish what I want to say about this. Yeah, I mean, just to jump, to tell you, look at this, how adaptable, and maybe that's not quite the right word, how open-minded Homer is to all of these. Here's two of the most amazing ones. 87, I want to say that Homer knows that there are all kinds of ways to be admirable, and on 87, Odysseus is saying to Calypso that Calypso is super attractive, but so is Penelope, even though they're terribly different. One of them is a goddess and only can sort of, it seems, have sex and sing songs and keep him entertained for a while, but he's gotten, bored with her after 8 years. But he says at the bottom of 87, "My lady goddess, here is no cause for anger. My quiet Penelope, how well I know, would seem a shade before your majesty, death and old age being unknown to you, while she must die. Yet it's true, each day I long for home, long for the sight of home." That is, there's no way to compare the two of them. There's no way, they're just totally different. The kind of life that you could lead with Penelope and the kind of life you could lead with Calypso. And since they can't be compared, because there's no common standard, they can't be ranked either. There's no sense in which one of them is better. But if you think that that's interesting, oh boy, I didn't write down the page numbers, this crucial one. Well, I'm going to tell you about it, and you're going to have to find it. How could I do that? Anyway, the really punch one, I know I was worried about trying to spell these two names. It's the Cyclops and the Phaeacians. We got to find it. Where does he? Somebody's going to be good enough to find it. Where is he talking to the Phaeacians, and they're telling him about their relation to the Cyclops? So the Phaeacians are these people who rescue him, and he spends his time, and they're so good at everything, and they're so nice, and they're so intelligent and so laid back. Help! Nobody's got a Phaeacian and Cyclops thing. I gotta have it. Okay. Oh, but it's the Phaeacians talking about their relation to the Cyclops. They say they're explaining who they are.
Are you sure that they say that they're related to Cyclops? I know they said they were.
Yeah, no, they say, I'll tell you what it says. They say that we dine with the gods and that we are so close to the gods, but the Cyclopses are just as close as we, or we're as close as the Cyclopses. Some absolutely amazing, you couldn't get further apart, something or others, than the Cyclops, the people, and the Phaeacian people, and yet they say, the Phaeacians say, that they're equal. Help. How could I not write it down? What book? Okay, well, that's the main thing. Let's find book 7. Latimer doesn't help us much. Okay, and now what's the line?
None still fine.
Okay, in book 7. Ah, yeah. Okay, great. Thanks a million. 117. I would have been gone home in despair. Okay, here we are. You wouldn't believe it, but the moral I'm trying just to tell you now is that Homer is so open-minded and that in his story, nothing is ranked above anything else. Okay, here, so on 117 near the top, if, as may be, see, he is some god where they're talking about, what about Odysseus, so-and-so, until now, okay, about the gods now. Come down from heaven, the gods are working strangely. So now comes about 6 lines down on 117. Until now, they, the gods, have shown themselves in glory only after great hecatombs, those figures banqueting at our side, throned like ourselves. Or if some traveler met with them alone, they bore no least disguise. We are their kin, gigantes. I don't know what those are giants, I guess, but I don't know what that's doing in there. Oh, I see, giants and cyclopses rank no nearer God than we. You realize what a weird thing it is for the Phaeacians to say that? They're the most refined, the most civilized human beings in the whole world. And they say and the cyclopses are so bad that they don't even have any community. They don't even have agriculture. All they've got is cheese and wine and sheep and isolation. And they don't even respect Zeus. Remember, the Polyphemus says, if you think we have to be nice to you because you're strangers, you're just crazy. We don't have to be nice to you because we're cyclopses. We don't care what Zeus thinks. And that's somehow, I just don't know what to say about it, except that they are not ranked. And that's somehow the deep polytheistic sensitivity of Homer. Okay, now it's time to have another pause if anybody is sitting on some comment they want to make. Yeah.
Always, I found that the distance rule or trend, they always do something wrong. For example, they were the ones that opened the bad plan. Like right before the digit was about to get back home.
The cattle of the god of the sun.
Constantly, they ruin the business journey home and get the business apparently never.
I guess that's right. No, I don't think so. That's right. Nobody says those awful, stupid sailors. If only they hadn't done this. But I don't know. We're not told how they. See, I think they are blamed. Though I don't think we're told that they're blamed. But I think they got to be blamed by the logic of it. And the logic of it is the following: they are the same types of people as the suitors. They are selfish. They don't have any sense of the sacred. They don't have any sense of the gods. They don't have any gratitude. They are just they were thinking, boy, let's get Homer in a faster wheel. And they are responsible for what they do. And what they do is stupid and dangerous and so forth. And now I see a new point that you're pointing out, which is interesting. It's not, we know already that the suitors don't make sacrifices, don't show any gratitude, don't respect the tradition, and don't listen to the prophet and so forth. But now we're looking at these guys, and they're being sort of equally stupid. And what's interesting all of a sudden to me is, as you point out, I think you just pointed it out, at least it got to me that way, but they don't get blamed. They don't get anything. That's very good. Homer just doesn't even bother to tell you how awful, dumb and upsetting this is, that twice they kept Odysseus from getting home. And Odysseus doesn't go around and say to them, "Oh, you idiots, when will you ever shape up?" It's just not interesting to Homer that these people have that they reflect, they act on their own responsibility, they're not summoned there by any god, and they do dumb things. And I think there's a general point. If you don't respond, if you don't develop skills so that you can see what's good and what's bad to do, and be able to throw yourself into the good things and not the bad things, if you don't have that receptivity, then, and you act on your own reflections and your own desires, you're bound to do wrong, stupid things. It seems to Homer so obvious that he doesn't even say it. That's what I think. But, and you could probably maybe find places where that's wrong, in which case I'll be happy to learn. Yeah.
Back that point up, when Odysseus gets back to the island of the King of the Wind, he says that he can't help him out again because it's obvious that Zeus has something against him. So by the sailors opening that bag and sending Odysseus away from home, he aligns that with inheriting Zeus. So
I don't know what to make of that. What gets attributed to the will of Zeus and not attributed to the will of Zeus is very unclear to me. If you can, help me with it, anybody who wants to write a paper on it, do it. let's go and talk about Zeus let's go talk about the other gods. That's part of what I wanted to do today. And we still have time to do it. I'm going to talk about the gods chart now, which we gave out, which we haven't ever gotten to. It's not going to solve a problem about Zeus, unfortunately. Don't think that when we do, we're going to explain what's up with Zeus. It's as if Aeschylus has the best way of describing it. You'll see in the Odyssey that Zeus is behind everything that happens. And it's as if Zeus is just sort of that it happens. And sometimes it looks like he's just fate and so forth. It isn't as if he has any particular goals or favorites or anything. I take it that's got something to do with, and now I'm looking at the God chart, that Zeus' main job is the protector of strangers. That's weird. That's fascinating. I mean, that means sort of that he wants that outliers, that is, all kinds of people from other cultures, with other values and everything. Zeus is so for diversity that he protects them all equally. It's the same thing, only now raised higher. Instead of the Zeus treats everybody within the Homeric world equally, even the Cyclops and the Phaeacians. It's that Zeus treats everybody in the world equally, presumably. Even the strangers who are not part of the Homeric world. I mean, or however you want to describe the world where these Olympian gods live. All of them. And therefore, and now I'm just going to explain the interesting things about the God chart, that what are his two favorite children? Well, very odd. Hermes is one of his favorite children. You see the arrows that go up to the top. He's a thief, a go-between, and he has this job of going between worlds. He leads people from the living world to the underworld. He leads people from sickness to health. I forget, I had a list of other things he did that he leads people between, but you can try to figure it out. But whenever you're going from one world to another, like being living and then being dead, Hermes is there to take you there. He goes, and Athena, we know, also gets in sync with every world, the way Odysseus does. Now, what is going on there? I mean, you could really make a big contribution to my Homeric understanding. I don't know whether somebody else, I mean, there's so many million books on Homer. Why is that the job of Odysseus? Why is he the god for strangers, for people, cross-world people? I don't know. Is it obvious? You look like you might have do you have an opinion, Tom?
The passage is where the heroes talk about why it's important this way.
Why what? Yeah, why? Okay, why?
The need for reciprocity, in light of things. So you can't control nature, you can't control fate. It's important that when a good host to strangers, that if you choose to find yourself in such a situation that you might. Right?
Yeah, that's.
Reciprocity is important because we're all subject to nature and fate, all of it under control. It's what balance works with. So the order is found on something like reciprocity.
You would be doing to others as you have them doing to you, and that is, and you would want them to help you if you were a stranger lost someplace. So you would like everybody to help strangers who are lost someplace.
Why do the strangers? Why is it usually does it? Well, he sort of does the same job on the bank job. He has to hold together, 12 gods.
Is that how many there are?
He can't hold them together on the basis of his own will and power. Some sense he holds together his family.
Yes. And therefore he's the ultimate, I see what you're thinking there. I like it better than your first point. I think your first point is right, but it's not sort of ontological. But ontologically, Zeus has got to be the whatever it is behind every kind of world, that you can cross into. If there may be worlds so far like black holes or something which you can't go to. But any world that you can go to, Zeus is the common feature of worlds.
When all goes together, something like reciprocity.
Hmm.
Body is like possible.
I'm not convinced, though I have nothing, I don't think, I just don't feel it's sort of ontologically deep in it. I mean, somehow the idea that it's finally just a sort of trade-off of, it may be, let's be fair. I mean, what it might be is, if you're a raiding, going off exploring kind of, person, then, or culture, then you want to be clear that you can take in strangers and they won't raid you and kill you and take your crops. And Zeus wants you not to do that. He wants this culture to work, and it works if you protect everybody from everybody. That sounds too practical somehow to me. There must be something about the whole thing that requires a God that is behind everything, and that's what's trying to get itself expressed by this protector of strangers. That's my line, but I'm certainly not very happy with it. It seems like such an important thing. There's one more, so important that Hermes, the gangster god, the thief, he's got no redeeming features, and he's Zeus's favorite son and second and tied for favorite child. What's going on? Yeah.
Not to challenge Tyler's point, but also the suitors mentioned after Antinous throws his bench at Odysseus in disguise, that it could be a god in disguise. So
you better not.
You're supposed to follow these rules of Xenia, which is the Greek word for, I guess, chivalry.
I don't know. Well, let's wait and think about it, and we'll talk about it next time. And I'm still sort of for the view that there's got to be something, just a kind of power that holds it all together, and that is Zeus. And if you're a power that holds it all together, then you've got to be able to go to protect the people who go from world to world, because you're the kind of common force between all the worlds. But I don't know what to say about it, and I wish I did. But I think if you want to think about it, you should think about why Hermes is the tied for first favorite god. I mean, because that's so strange. The thief, but he's big at going between worlds and worlds, and the plurality of worlds is very important to this view. And the ability to go from world to world is very important to this view. So Zeus is going to be protecting people who go from world to world. That's all I can say yet. So let me go on and say what I can say. We're going to look at the whole chart now. By the way, I give you this chart not because I think that you really need it to read Homer, but it is sort of the case, at least for me, that I had all these gods' names, Hermes and Ares and Artemis and Apollo, and I didn't really understand what they did or why there were these ones and not others and so forth. And the more I taught this, the more I saw that there was a lot of structure in the God story. And so I'll read the structure up from the bottom. And so there's these ultimate forces, the earth and the heavens, giving birth to, or whatever, birth isn't quite the right word, producing, I guess, chronos, that time, and that's the most basic thing. And then there's this story that really another thing that I'm telling you all the things that I don't understand today, but that's sooner or later I have to tell you. I mean, the next level is, if you look on the left, I have these little boxes that tell you there's this pre-world power level. Then there's all these various features that go across cultures. And we haven't talked about them because Homer isn't interested in them. But there is the seasons, there is the need for shelter, there is death, there is nature. All that is in this next level. And Poseidon is a funny one because he is nature. He is Zeus's brother. He's not one of the children of Zeus. All the rest are. But with Poseidon, it's sort of nature understood as overwhelming force. Now all of these here are understood differently in different cultures. I say they're the Greek version of variations across cultures. They all have seasons. They all have need for shelter. They all have death. They all have overwhelming nature power. And those are now I want to say, I guess those are the gods of them. But notice where that leaves me in some kind of trouble. Because I've been saying gods are the attuning one. Gods are moods. I think that's true of the pantheon gods. All the children of Zeus are attuning ones and moods. That's that sort of fan of gods at the top. That's the pantheon. Literally, pan is cross and theon is God or divine. And those are all moods or skills or something like that. But here's this question to think about. And not only try to figure out what Zeus is doing and why the stranger's business, but are these all gods? Demeter and Hestia and Hades? If they are, that's a different meaning of gods than the pantheon gods. I don't know what to think about that. What is it to be a god, if not a mood? I don't have any candidates. I'm open to suggestions. By the way, now I hope that you guys will come to office hours and talk to me if I don't let you talk in class, because I have a feeling I'll learn something and you'll learn something if we all talk to each other about this. But right now, does anybody want to help any? I mean, it's not that I have no idea what to say about these things. Well, then let's go on and I'm going to go back to my God chart. Let's see. So the next thing is that Homer has, and this is very important for getting ready to read the Odyssey. Homer is not just reporting on this God situation, which I got in the chart. He's making it up. What does that mean? Well, that means that he's throwing out all kinds of gods and demigods and nymphs and other whatevers that and the Furies particularly. All the stuff that he doesn't like and is irrational and dangerous and stuff in Greek mythology and in Greek practices. Homer is cleaning it all up. And that means that he's not just writing a work of art that articulates a culture that's already there, focuses it, like the Greek temple or the medieval cathedral. He's something, but he's not a reconfigurer either, because there's no unified culture there before him. Just a lot of different myths all running around. So I have to make a new word for him. He's an originator. We've only got one of those. He makes up the Homeric world by including some and throwing out lots of entities, creatures, powers, let's call them powers, that the myths tell us about. And it's so interesting that when he does throw them out, he creates this wonderful, beautiful, unified culture that Homer is famous for describing, the Homeric world. But you can't get away with that. You can't just throw out the dark side, which is what he's trying to do. And you don't hear about the dark side until you read the Odyssey. 500 years or 1,000 years after Homer, things have gotten into a terrible mess because the dark side, the people or the creatures, the powers, I guess again, the powers that he's throwing out and just refuses to talk about, turn out to be powerful. And that's causing lots of trouble. But let's go on here. So he cleans up the myths and so forth. And for instance, I read that Hesiod and one of the other myth writers treats Polyphemus as a god. Well, I think that's a bad idea, because whatever gods are, that piece of nature Polyphemus is a volcano. As some of you may have realized that it's got a one fiery eye and it throws rocks at Odysseus and so forth. It's a kind of somehow a kind of mixture of a myth about a creature and a myth about a volcano. It's no coincidence that he's the son of Poseidon, the overwhelming natural force, but he doesn't belong in the pantheon. And so Homer just takes him out, even though Hesiod keeps him in. The Cyclops is not a god in the attuning business. That's another way of saying, so Homer doesn't put him into the, he's not considered a son of Zeus. He's a son of Poseidon. That's different. So the Cyclopses are not gods, I think. They're demigods, according to Homer. When Homer wants to throw out something that he doesn't like, he demotes it to demigods. And so, let's see. So now we get this coherent account, and we've got these variations across all worlds. I'm going to get back to where I was there. But if it's not a way of life and not a mood, if you can't live in it, then Homer's not much interested in it. So these stuff here in the middle, the harvest, the shelter, the death, and the nature, since that's not moods, those can't be ways of life, Homer's not interested in it. He's interested in Aphrodite as a passionate way of life. I'm talking about the top of the chart. Artemis, the virgin hunter, she's nowadays like the people who like horses, or maybe she's now like an ecologist. She's the one closest to nature. Apollo is a very strange one, because Apollo doesn't play any role at all. This is all preparing for the Odyssey, which is so dense and complicated. So everything I can say before you plunge into it helps. So Apollo plays a big role in the Odyssey, but it doesn't do much of anything in Homer. His job is prophecy, medicine, music. He's the far shooter, the lord of distance. Sort of 1,000 years later, Aeschylus asks himself, well, what is that really? And he answers that that's something like theory. Apollo is kind of proto-theory, as I wrote there. Theory is something that you do at a distance, and it's sort of related to medicine and prophecy and so forth. It's not very tight, but Apollo turns out to be, in Aeschylus, a kind of rationalist theory-making person. Athena, we know what it is. Hermes, we do. Ares is the war one. Hephaestus is the crafts one. Persephone, we don't hear much about. What is Persephone and Dionysus are gods that Homer doesn't care about. That's why I put them in a different kind of fun. But they are Zeus's children, and probably something's going on there too that somebody might understand. And then we just have time to finish. There's this puzzle about Hera. Really annoying. I mean, one wants to have, Hera is certainly the goddess of domesticity. And so she ought to be the goddess of sort of protecting the hearth and so forth, which she is. But she ought to there ought to be Hera versus Aphrodite. There ought to be a god for Penelope, so to speak, for the wife who stays at home and remains faithful and does the housekeeping and so forth. What's happening? Well, what's happening, and this is not a satisfactory answer, but you got a big problem with Hera. If she turns out to be the wife of Zeus, which she seems to be sometime, because she gets jealous of Zeus running off with all the swans and so forth that come around, and but if she can't be the wife of Zeus, because then she would be both. If she were in the pantheon, she would be the child of Zeus and the wife. The sort of mythology is running into trouble there, or maybe I am. But all I can think of is she seems to get. She can't be coming from Zeus, so there's a special arrow for her coming from Cronus, so that she can be the wife of Zeus. But then she's in such a peculiar position Homer doesn't know what to say about it, so he doesn't say anything about it. So I can't do anything about that. So I'm gonna, okay, give me 3 more minutes and I will finish the gods. So we've got crafts and we've got Apollo and Artemis and Hera, Poseidon, and then we got the issue of the strangers. I've done all this. Okay, I want to just set you up for what you should read next time, for sure. Read what happens in the underworld. That's the one big area we haven't talked about yet. And when you read the underworld, keep in mind my claim that no ways of life are privileged over any other way of life. Because the issue of whether there are better and worse ways of life comes up in a very interesting way in the underworld. Okay,